Hey, this is Steve Good.
Hey, this is Bo Henriksen.
From the Coin Chat, and today we are checking out the charts. Bo, you and I have been talking a lot about what's going on with Bitcoin, Ether, crypto in general. It's just the most long-term bear market. So exhausting.
It's exhausting and tiring.
It is. So we were talking a lot about Bitcoin and what's going on with it, and so I thought it would be really good just to do a quick review of that, and if we want to get into some questions around other stuff around Ether, and we can do that as well. So I've drawn up a couple of charts. So for our listeners and our viewers, I should say, I'm going to just pop right over to our Bitfinex Bitcoin chart that I put together. And Bo, why don't I start by just telling you what these blue arrows mean, because you're probably going to ask me that.
Yes, I've never seen those before.
No?
No.
They're magic. I waved my magic wand and these blue arrows appeared.
Wow.
No. So these blue arrows actually, so one of my, I'm going to give a shout out to my friend Crockett from Society International. It's a group that I belong to. And it's, kind of to help each other with business and personal growth and everything else. So Crockett it commented to me that it's really helpful to see some of the fundamentals when we're looking at technicals, because those are the two things we look at in charts. So, and he said it's really helpful because it helps to kind of solidify in people's minds the relationship between them. So I said, okay, good idea. So what I decided to do is actually put the blue arrows in to represent fundamental news that came out, which has nothing to do necessarily with technical charts, but sometimes has an impact. So the first arrow that you see here on the left was actually the news when the IMF said, oh, Bitcoin, it's, going to disrupt financial markets, and then did this big red sell-off, right?
Yeah.
And that was on the, I think it was on the 10th of November. And then on the 14th of November.
October.
October. On the 14th of October, we had the big announcement that USD Tether was basically recalling a bunch of their coins. And in doing that, it just massively drove up the price of Bitcoin, albeit mostly temporarily, and then it slid back down.
Would have been nice to have had a limit order there just for fun at 7K.
If you had, it was way up to 7.7.
Yeah.
So, temporarily. But yeah, it would never hurt to put in an order like that for fun.
No,
anyway.
just for fun, right?
Yeah. So the third arrow, you're probably wondering what's happening and you probably know the answer to this. What's happening on the 5th of November or before?
Tell me. I don't know.
Well, we're expecting to hear news from the SEC about the...
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah, I got it.
Right. So I put this arrow in to kind of indicate that someplace in this time frame here, we're expecting to hear something which could have an impact on the movement of Bitcoin.
Are we going to see a bull run, you think?
I'd like to think so. I would love that to happen. I mean, look, there's two lines I've drawn up here, and I'm going to try to just reduce the chart a little bit so people can see what's going on a long-term basis, because I also drew that out to show people what's been going on. If you look back, all the way back to, really the beginnings of the first movement of Bitcoin moving up, which was in March 2017, and then kind of bounced on a bottom line in July of 2017, and just kind of continued on. If that line was the only line you'd drawn and you just kept drawing the line out, isn't it funny that it's actually bounced 3 times on that same line? Yeah. So that's telling us that there's this sort of really kind of long-term upward trend that's been going on the whole time. And despite the fact that in the last year, 2018, we've been in a bear market, the long-term view is still upward trended, with the exception, of course, of this still going on for a year problem of, this trend that started downwards, or even started downwards from up here somewhere. But, this downward trend is colliding now with this long-term upward trend. And the thing is, normally the longer term trend should win, but that doesn't always happen that way. So the optimist in me says, hey, look, we've got this particular event happening on the 5th of November, and I could easily redraw this line in such a slight way that it would intersect with the 5th of November.
Oh, Steve, just a question. So
Sure.
should I buy now, or should I wait for the trend to go up just a little bit before
I can't say that because we can't give financial advice on this
No, no,
show.
no, but you can
We
give
can
it to
only
me.
tell people what we think's going on. I mean, look, if I redrew this line slightly just for fun, just a tiny bit, and I move it just to those lines there,
Yeah.
look at the magic of how it actually comes to the 5th of November. It was like this was destined to be the date that we were going to get.
Wow.
If you actually draw it like that. So
It's
is
kind of
not,
like it's kind of like Doctor Doomday, or
oh, I hate Dr. Doom. We'll put a link down below. Bo, if you've got a link for Dr. Doom, I'll put it down in the description below.
Yeah,
Dr.
let's put it
Doom is the
there.
guy that everything is negative, everything is going wrong. The thing is, it's not coincidental. I mean, we see this in trading all the time, where there's a collision or not a collision, but what's the word I'm looking for? Where two events happen at the same time. A technical event and a fundamental event happen around the same time period, normally very, very closely together. We're certainly seeing that in this instance. This is a classic thing you see where a fundamental event and a technical event happen to collide or meet on the same, meet is a better word. So they're meeting on the same day or around the same time frame. So this could be a good sign, or it could be a non-event, or it could be negative. I mean, because we're on this long-term trend, this news could just, drop the price of Bitcoin. Now, the reason I don't think that's necessarily going to happen is because this line also is kind of interesting in another really weird way, which is I think it roughly correlates to the minimum price that you need for Bitcoin mining to be profitable to break even. Pretty close, slightly above, which is really weird, right? But maybe it's not. Maybe that's fundamental, or maybe it's actually the coin is actually having an impact on its own chart, because crypto charts don't trade the same as equity or bond charts. They do trade in a different way, and a lot of the technical tools we would use like RSI, stochastics, don't necessarily apply and work in crypto, as you know. So it's entirely possible that we're going to see that even if the news from the SEC is, we're going to hold off and wait till 2019 for the ETFs to be approved, then crypto might just continue along this line here, with the Bitcoin might just stay along this path. That's entirely possible.
All right.
That's what I believe, because I believe that Bitcoin has kind of a floor of 6,000-ish, and even analysts like Tom Lee, who's covered this quite a lot in a lot of depth from Fundstrat, he's even said that the 6,000 is kind of a floor, and it's what supports Bitmain and the other big mining companies to sustain them. And we don't want them running at a loss. That's not good for any of this. So we need to kind of sustain some minimum level of price. So that suggests that we could just go sideways, and these lines have become kind of irrelevant, although it puts us in kind of a no man's land territory. I kind of like the fact that we are in this kind of slight uptrend, and there is kind of another long-term uptrend that's along here, and we've been sitting in this channel for quite a while. So that's the kind of sideways channel, but it's sideways and slightly upwards. So
what do you think? What do you think? Like events like, if we would have like another financial crisis come in, do you think that you would see like a massive sell-off on, for example, Ethereum that many ICOs uses, or even private holders of Bitcoin and whatnot?
That's the thing, is if you look a year ago, you used to find that Bitcoin was going up when the U.S. stock market would go down, and would do the opposite when when it went down, up, down. And the last couple of weeks we've seen. October was just a whipsaw of volatility on the NASDAQ and the U.S. stock exchanges in general, and we've been flat. There's been no link, almost nothing.
It's really weird.
Yeah, and actually people have argued that actually crypto is trading more along the lines of emerging markets like Turkey or Argentina's currencies than they are against the US dollar now, or the US stock market. So hard to say, to be honest. Everyone always looks for different fundamentals to compare things to. And as I said, it might be true one minute and not true the next. But this is where we're at with Bitcoin. And I think we're kind of coming to an interesting junction where around the 5th of November, we've got this interesting point. And it might be good if we come back again on the 5th or the 6th and say, look what happened, because if you look at this line here, we're trading just above this resistance line now, assuming that this is drawn correctly, or we're just below it. We're someplace in that zone now. We're actually potentially we're in a good place, because if we're actually above it multiple times, then all we need to do is just go above it and stay above it, and we could easily start rising. So yeah, my gut feel says we're kind of at the edge of this bear market kind of turning around. But certainly the catalyst will be, if the ETFs are approved, we're going to see this move. That would be my instinct. If it's delayed, probably people will be like, well, we kind of expected that. And if it's just outright rejected, I can't predict what would happen. But I somehow don't think there's going to be as much mayhem because we've already kind of heard this.
We already had,
So it's kind of like a non-event, or it's going to be a big event. There's just kind of, I don't feel like there's anything else. It's either going to be yes and it goes up, or no, or maybe, and it just kind of continues on sideways and maybe still keeps going up, because I think people have kind of given up on the notion of the ETFs for the moment, but anything is possible.
Oh yeah. Most people are holding anyway at the moment, I think. There's not that much trading going on if you look at the volume.
No, you're right. I mean, the volume is definitely lower than it's been, and you can see that here because it's quite low. The volume's down at the bottom here. So yeah. So shall I just pop over to Ether and show you that? Because it's
let's do Ether.
Quite different actually. So I'll just do these real quick because we don't want to take too much time. But Ether is kind of interesting because there's this long-term line that I drew out here, and it goes back actually quite a ways. It goes back to it goes all the way back to, keeps going back. Kind of started off over in March of 2017, kind of similar to what Bitcoin did. And there's your support line. It kept bouncing on there's your support, continues to long bounces and hits that one as well. And it kind of continued doing all that for a while. And then it dropped below it. And that's the point where we have here, where we can see that it's just kind of been like, we've gone below this, now what? And that's where we've gone into, and that's where things got a little bit dicey, and we've continued to slide until we got to this point right here, which is where we hit about 170 was the low, or 168.70 was the low. And then it kind of bounced off of that, because that was, now it's on the other side, and it's gone, really above that resistance, and it's been kind of moving sideways. And I drew up this very small, but hopefully somewhat useful line in here, which shows that we've got kind of this very gently supported, upward trend, not hugely upward for the moment. But again, we're in this kind of channel, but in a short-term channel, because there's lots of, resistance that kind of got established here. You can see it's kind of bumping along here, here and there and there and there. It's the same. It keeps, bumping along that same point, but it's very short-term. But I drew it out long-term because I just wanted to see what it's doing, and if there's something as a pattern, maybe not. Yeah. So right now we're just kind of going sideways. I suppose and I haven't drawn any news up, but I think there's probably some news that may come regarding Ether and being used for futures trading of some forms or other forms of government approvals. And that may well have an impact on going upwards, but I'm not sure what to say about it in terms of the long-term pattern, because there really isn't anything substantial that we can work with here that gives me any kind of sign as to where it's going right now. But I'm also not a professional trader, but I'm able to at least kind of map this out.
Well, it is, according to my calculations, it is long. It is in a long state, but it's coming from a sort of a crash state, I'd say, more than a stable long. So you can also see the trend line is really, it's a short trend line.
Yeah.
It's not that long, right? But
so I'm more so at this moment, if you were asking me, I'm much more bullish Bitcoin than Ether. And, the difficulty, of course, is, do you want to convert your Ether to Bitcoin? And that's, which we'll go to the next chart and look at that, because, of course, now you're asking what's the relationship between Bitcoin and Ether, and this is a good or a bad time to swap them, which we'll do in a second. So, my main comment on Ether really is that you've got two different types of people out there dealing with Ether, and they're so separate and so unaware of each other. It's actually quite funny. So the one group is the group that you and I probably sit in more than other, which is the group of people that have been, very much aware of the ICOs, and people invest into the ICOs. They put Ether into the ICOs. The ICOs either hold the Ether or they flip it back to US dollar because they need the dollars to actually run their business. And of course, that's a factor that's been going on for a while. Coupled with that, we've seen the adoption of a lot of other crypto platforms like Waves, Lisk, Komodo, Neo, Stellar, Nem, to name a few. I'm sure there's others. Dai, the Dai maker. So, and I apologize to any of the other projects out there if I didn't mention you. Please give us a ping, drop us a comment. We're happy to have you on the show and talk about your platforms too. So that's a side note for the platforms out there if they want to get us to talk about what they're doing and help raise awareness. But that shift, of course, doesn't help because within the crypto community, the Ether community got very big, and that means there's people are diversifying to other communities that are smaller to make fundraising and project awareness easier. But that's one community. The other community is all the institutional investors, all the people that are putting their money into buying, and they see that, and the SEC approved Bitcoin and Ether as both, not violating the law, as both being utility-based tokens without any particular issues around them. So there's a whole kind of institutional trend shifting in that space. And I know you've shared an article with me that we can put into the description down below. So we do see that there's an institutional trend taking place where people are investing in both Bitcoin and Ether, which is somewhat independent of what's actually going on within the ecosystem. And, it leaves me with the question mark as to whether, and people are still using Ether for fundraising. Institutions are still buying Ether. So the question is going to be whether or not Ether moves upwards in a parallel pace with Bitcoin or does something else. Does it continue on a downward trend against USD? So,
for sure.
Any comments or questions, thoughts on that?
No, I think no.
Okay. So let me pop over to the Ether Bitcoin screen just briefly. So this one's a little. I mean, for me, this is a little bit harder to figure as to where we're going with this. I mean, there's certainly this kind of long-term line that I drew in here, which is really at 0.027. Now we've seen Ether to Bitcoin relationship at 0.15. Right now it's 0.15. Now it's at 0.03. So there is no real established kind of relationship between them. But I do see that we're kind of, again, coming to this junction where we've got this long-term support line. And the long-term line goes back quite a ways. If we look at it, it goes, really goes back a long ways, probably to the same point again. Here's a kind of an interesting starting point I put in, which was December of 2017 when we first saw that big kick and rise of, Bitcoin, Ether to Bitcoin. And if I kind of scroll across to where we are now on a long-term basis, it's kind of just bumped, hit there. That's kind of a low. That was around 0.027, which again is where the line is. And it's kind of gone skidding sideways. Just like everything else, everything's gone sideways. So the relationship between them has been rather steady. Now, of course, with this long-term line playing in here, which is the long-term slide that we've seen Ether do against the USD, it's the same against Bitcoin. Right now, really hard to say what's it going to do and when. I mean, right now we're looking at kind of a meeting point sometime in December 2018, which is roughly when we saw the last time that Ether rose against Bitcoin. So there could be an annual trading pattern as well, which we haven't established well enough because it happened last year. We don't know if it'll be an annual thing. We could probably look at that in another episode and see, annual trading patterns. But if
history is repeating itself.
Right. Which oftentimes happens with a lot of these things. You do see like Chinese New Year and big moves happening in the Chinese New Year period. And then right after Chinese New Year, another trading pattern happens. So that happens every year as well. So there's, everybody likes to find really weird fundamental things that have impact. And we could probably draw a bunch of the arrows in for all the different Chinese New Years and see what it's done to the price. That could be fun.
Or you can even take the last 5 years and just draw the Bitcoin curve and the graph and put them on top of each other, and you'll see similar.
Yeah. So going back to the question is that we see that Bitcoin is probably going to make a move. It looks like that could be it looks the most promising of the three trade pairs. And the question for me is, what's Ether going to do against Bitcoin? And the answer is really, really hard to tell. So it might just stay sideways at the same level, which means that it might rise up against the USD, but remain relatively fixed against Bitcoin, or it could, break out of this pattern and follow Bitcoin too. It's really hard to tell right now.
Oh yeah, sure is.
So anyway, that's kind of where we're at right now. And I thought it's interesting just to mention this because in particular with the SEC coming out with its news on the 5th of November, we really can't tell what's going to happen with any of this, but that's a fundamental, aspect to what could very well affect the trading patterns that we've got right now. So, yeah.
Cool.
Helpful.
Thanks, Steve. That's a great update.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. Really
Great.
Nice.
Well, and for all of our listeners, if you guys, guys, girls, women, whatever, if you have an interest in hearing about other trade pairs, we're always happy to have a look and try to give you our best inputs on what we see. We're working on trying to get some other traders on the show to help us to kind of do more analysis and better analysis than me, because I'm no professional, but I'm certainly giving it a go.
You're doing a great job. It's good.
I'm trying. Yeah. Well, I mean, I've been at this for a while, so I have a pretty good idea what's going on. But, as I said, I'm no professional, but I think that, what I've shown, I've validated with other traders, and it's fundamentally it's correct. But we need to see, some of this stuff moving a little bit more. That'd be great to see some movement now, get out of this bear market. I think we're close. I really do. I think that this 5th of November date could happen sooner because the SEC has been known to give out announcements earlier than the 5th. So, right now it's 2nd of November. We've got the weekend ahead of us. And then Monday is Dr. Doom Day or
Dr. Doom Day.
Celebration Day. So we might see some news today, and then this episode will have to have a follow-up immediately afterwards.
Or, yeah, sure we will.
Well, we're gonna have an episode follow-up anyway. So anyway, thank you everybody for listening in. Please do give us a like if you like this. We'd love some comments down below. If there's something you'd like us to follow or investigate, trade pairs of any sort, you can do that on TradingView anytime. To the moon. Until next time.